So, I like to do pop quizzes. I think you guys are familiar with that, especially on Thursday nights. As we're going through the Word, I'll just say pop quiz. Class, there's a pop quiz, and so here's a pop quiz for you right now. How many books are in the Old Testament? Now, if you're in seminary or a pastor's wife, you can't answer this. So, does anybody does anybody know how many books are in the Old Testament? Just raise your hand. You don't have to blurt it out. Okay, 39. 39 is the answer. So there's 66 books. So that would mean that there are 27 in the New Testament. And so that was a pop quiz. I should have actually maybe done that at the end, but I think it wouldn't have made the point that we're going to look at here this morning. And as we get back into chapter 22, we're going to find that Jesus is facing a pop quiz himself of sorts from the Pharisees. And so let's get right into these first couple of verses, Matthew 22:34 through 36. And Jesus speaking, it says, "But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and then one of them, a lawyer, asking him a question, testing him and saying, 'Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?'" Now, this debate about which is the greatest commandment in the law had been going on for centuries amongst the Jewish spiritual leaders. And there are 613 laws in the Old Testament. And so, when they asked Jesus which one is the greatest, and he wasn't prepared for this, just like you weren't prepared when I asked you how many books are in the Old Testament. But now, if I were to ask you, you would know, right? So that it wouldn't be such a surprise. And so they think that they're going to test him, that they're going to corner Jesus with this pop quiz. And so they viewed these 613 laws and divided them in a couple of ways. Number one, there are 248 positive injunctions of those 613 laws. So 248 of positive injunctions, and then there are 365 negative prohibitions. And so there's a lot of don't do that, and then there's a few but do this, and it'll go well with you. And so they wanted Jesus to pick out from all of these. And it's interesting that as I was reflecting on this verse and the fact that there are these 613 laws, I was thinking of Paul, Romans chapter 7. In that portion of Romans, Paul is talking a lot, extensively, about our relationship with the law. And he gets really deep. It's a very theological book. It's probably the most doctrinaire book you're going to find in the New Testament, and so he digs in deep there. But as he's coming down to the end of chapter 7, before he gets to this glorious chapter 8, he says this. He says, "The things I ought to do, I do not do, and the things that I will to do, I don't do." So think about this in terms of the type of laws there are. There are positive injunctions. The things I ought to do, I don't do. And the negative prohibitions. And then the things I will not to do, I do. So his answer, what he's speaking to there in chapter 7 of Romans, is he's saying, look, whether it's a positive law or a negative law, I fail at each type of law. Right? And so sometimes we do the things we shouldn't do, and sometimes we don't do the things we ought to do. And it goes both ways. And oftentimes, the way our minds work is we often think in the negative. We think, well, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done that. But we in terms of what the positive things that we should do. And so what the leaders did here, the religious leaders here, is they divided the laws into two categories. And one was the heavy or the important laws, and then the second category would be the light or the less important laws. Now this seems kind of an arbitrary sort of dividing line to me, that somehow that God would give these 613 laws, and then man would come along and say, well, these are the most important ones, and then these are the lesser important. But we know what we see from the book of James here. James chapter 2 and verse 10 says, "But for whoever shall keep the whole law and yet stumble at one point, he is guilty of them all." Right? So here's the thing: there's no end around it. It's a football term. You're going to run around the end of the line, And you're going to find that lane, and you're going to hit it, and you're going to make forward progress. Instead of going right through. You ever see those running backs try to go right through the line, and they get stopped right there, dead in their tracks? And so sometimes they break through, right? It's pretty amazing to see, but sometimes it's the end around. I could get into talking about football a little bit here, but I'll try to refrain from that. But the point is that there are, of all these laws, that they're all equally important. And if we're guilty of breaking even one law, we're guilty of breaking the whole law. We are not to judge ourselves in terms of, well, I've only broken a few of the lighter laws, therefore I'm not really guilty per se, because I know somebody or a group of people that are breaking more laws and more of the heavy type of laws. And typically in our human wisdom and our human way of thinking, we would then categorize ourselves juxtaposed to those that, quote unquote, are sinning, worse sinners than us, and say we're not that bad, and therefore we alleviate any sense of guilt or a negative conscience. Right? And it's just one way that we can have that end around. But Jesus is saying through the word, James, his brother James, by the way, wrote the book of James, and he says that if you're guilty of breaking one point, you're guilty of breaking all. And so just a little bit about the law there, because we're going to talk a lot about love in a moment. And so we go on now to look at Jesus' response in Matthew 22, 37 and 38. And Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind, and this is the first and great commandment." And so again, Jesus shows us mastery, right, over this man's limited understanding by quoting what is called the Shema. And we're going to turn to our next slide, which is from Deuteronomy 6, and this is the Shema. Okay, observant Jews would have, even to this day, would say this daily. And it says here, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength." And so this is the Shema. Shema means to hear. Now, if you were to turn and look at the context here in Deuteronomy 6, you would understand that the idea of hearing the word is just as much as we hear it, that then we are to employ the word in our lives. And it goes on, it talks about in this passage, and particularly about teaching our kids, about passing along what we hear, what we know to be true, and passing it along to other people. And so this is a critical part. And of course, this all kind of comes into play when he says, that we are to love the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and that you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your strength. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead, but I'll tell you this, the second commandment is like it, that then you are to love your neighbor as yourself. So if we're loving God with all of our heart, with all of our mind, with all of our soul, with all of our strength, you think, and we're going to talk about what that love means in a moment, but before we get there, just imagine what that entails. That with your whole being, you're devoted to God, that you're completely committed to Him, and that He comes first. And can you imagine if you're soaking in all that God is, because you're so committed, you're in such close proximity to Him in your life, and you're just in His presence, and everything He is, and again, by the context of the Shema, it must then go out to other people, and again, the second commandment is like it, and that is that you love your neighbor as yourself. This is fascinating because our love for God is first and foremost, and then it informs how we love our neighbor. We are not to just love our neighbor based on the standards that we think are fine or that culture thinks is fine. We are to love our neighbor, through the love that we have of God, right? So this gets tricky. We'll talk about some application in a moment. And so I want to get on here to the next verses 39 and 40, which again gets to the second commandment. And Jesus goes on. He adds to the answer, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And on these two commandments hang all the law and all the prophets. So 613 laws. And by the way, it's a rabbinic tradition, and you'll notice that in some of their gowns and in Solomon's temple, there were pomegranates, like carved into the temple, or they would wear them on their garments. And in rabbinic tradition, they would say that there were 613 seeds in a pomegranate. Now, that's not true. When I was on my tour of Israel years ago, I learned that, and for many years, I taught. There are 613 seeds in a pomegranate. Now, there may be, but typically there's anywhere between 600 and 1,000 seeds in a single pomegranate. And so, but I was taught that rabbinic tradition, and I held on to it and mistakenly taught that there were 613, but that's a bit of a side note. And so, so he rounds out that answer by saying that everything, if you're loving God and you're loving your neighbor, you're not going to break any one of the 613 laws. Not one of them. And this is a pretty cool thing, right? So it's like no pressure. You just say, well, I'm just going to love God. Okay, so then you ask yourself, okay, am I loving God? Right? This is the reflection question for you, right? If I love God with all of my heart, with all of my soul, my mind, and my strength, what is that going to look like? How is that going to transform me, right? It's amazing. I'll kind of tip my hand a little bit. Jesus in John 15 says that if you love me, agape me, we're going to talk about, you're going to obey my commandments. The love of God, first and foremost, leads to obedience. I'm getting ahead of my notes, but I'm excited about this. It leads to obedience. Now, 2026, Midwest Americans, democracy, wild times out there in the world. We've been raised up through generations from the hippies. Some of you are the old hippie folks. And some of us are Gen Xers, and maybe there's some millennials. And are there any Zs? Anybody? You're a Z? You guys are Zs? Okay. And so you're the end of the line. So X marks the spot, but you're the end of the line. And so yeah, I don't know what's going to happen beyond your generation. We all, but pour into you guys because you're the light for your generation. Praise God for that. And so we don't want to love our world around us according to their how they want. Have you ever heard the term love is love? Have you ever seen that, like in a meme or, and what are they saying? They're saying that, well, if you love God, you should, and God is love. They love this one. And if God is love, then why don't you love those that are participating in this sort of sinful lifestyle, homosexuality, transgenderism? And let's just not pick on that. That's kind of the hate du jour that we have as Christians. And I'm using the term love loosely because I know that you guys are not hateful, but if you're part of some of these churches, they have the signs that say God hates so much, such and such. Have you ever seen that too? That's we don't want to go that way. That's not love. But be that as it may, love is love. That, that we should just love people as they are. Isn't that godly? Isn't that easier? Man, why cause all these problems and issues by standing against something? Why don't you just stand for something? Parents, if your child were to come into the kitchen when you were preparing breakfast, very curious at a young age, you can think of toddlers and that, and they come in and the stovetop is hot, and maybe there's a flame from the gas or it's a hot ring from the electrical, and the child were to go and touch that, and would it be loving to then just say, well, live and learn, go ahead and touch that. I think you won't do it again, kind of thing. Or do we stop them? Well, I think we stop them, right? Some of you are like, no, that means we have to have counseling, and so you see me afterwards. But if you said no, you stop them. See, that's loving. And it could look negative, like I want. Have you ever? But mommy, I want to. But daddy, I want to. I hate you. Have you ever? Yeah, you ever heard your kids say that? You don't let me have any fun, And Amy's like, she does that to Chris. And she's over there like, yeah, right, okay, he's nodding. And so it's the same way in terms of how we approach culture as Christians. It's a similar thing, isn't it? That somehow we say, you ought not do that. That you ought not, sort of live a lifestyle like this or do this or that. And then they would say, well, you're a hater. You have no love in you. If you really loved me, you'd allow me to live as I wanted, because after all, we know that this is an outdated ancient book that really has nothing to do with where we're at now in modern society and modern culture. And so they will kind of peck back, and they'll even use what we believe against us, as in the cases with love. And so now we're not to be mean-hearted, and I certainly don't want to say that we ought to be unwholesome when we approach these issues or these people. And so I want to look now at the 4 types of love that we find in the ancient Greek, because this will break it down and give us more insight into how we're to love. And so first, of course, we have the eros, which is actually not found in the New Testament, but it is an ancient Greek word, and this has to do with the romantic, passionate, or sexual type of love, the type of love that is righteously expressed in marriage, and this is eros. Now, it's interesting, and some commentators think that there's some theology by its lack of presence in the New Testament, and I'll let you guys do a deep dive on why that might be the case. Why is this eros love not even mentioned? It has its place, and it's certainly important. The expression of eros love is very important, but we want to. But it's not mentioned at all. The second type there you see is number 2, storge, and this is natural affection, especially towards those that are in your family. And so this is the love of parents for children, siblings for one another. It's instinctive, it's natural, it's biological, and it rarely appears in the New Testament. Storge. And so it's found in a compound form in the negative. And so we have astorgos, astorgos. And here in the negative, it's used like this in 2 places that speak to the depravity of man. In Romans chapter 1 and 31, it's listed among the marks of depravity that the natural affection from one to another will wane, will wax. And have you seen, and I know that as I've grown up, and I was aware of news stories, probably around the mid to late 70s, when I became aware of the world around me, and I remember Jimmy Carter, I don't remember Watergate per se, but I remember the Iran hostage situation where they went in to rescue those hostages, and the helicopter was shot down, and then Reagan is brought into office, and then of course he brought such a respect that they released the hostages immediately. So there's this natural affection over our lifetime. This is the point. Over our lifetime, we've seen a decline in natural affection from parent to child, child to parent, sibling to sibling, and so on and so forth. There has been a decline. The natural love of man is waning. Waxing would be growing. Waning would be decreasing. And so we certainly want to make sure that we as Christians are not struggling in this area, but that we are loving our family members. 2 Timothy 3:3 also mentions this, and it's a characteristic of the last days, that men will be lovers of self. They will not be lovers of others. And so self-love is a picture or a piece, if you will, or a mark of what you'll see humanity fall into in the last days, that we love ourselves. And so agape, which we're going to get to in a moment, will counter this. But the third type of love is philia, and its definition is that it's brotherly love. You think of Philadelphia, of course, the city of brotherly love. It speaks to deep friendship and affection between equals. And so some of us here have family members here, but we are, regardless of whether we have family here, we are a spiritual family, and we have a brotherly love for one another that is obvious to see, and also then even beyond that in agape. But it's rooted in mutual care and reciprocity, and some of the New Testament appearances of this is first of all in John 11:3, when Martha and Mary told Jesus about the illness of Lazarus, their brother, and they said, "Lord, behold, him who you love is sick." And so, this is the word for that philia, that brotherly love. And then James at 4:4, it says that friendship, that is this brotherly love with the world is enmity with God. And so we don't want to be in love, have any sort of affection for the things of the world. I like football. I like classic cars. I like music, to the point I collect records and all the rest. You all know about this. But am I to let my love, if you will, for those things have sway over my soul? No, the answer is no. But for example, big football fan growing up, and I'm a glutton for punishment, okay, because I grew up a Chargers fan, and then I moved here 26 years ago and became a Vikings fan, and they're always full of promise. Always. This is the year. And so, I don't know. I think I need to move to a place, where there's a good football team, and I'll have to, maybe Seattle right now might be the place to go. But here's what used to happen. I would watch the Chargers or the Vikings on Sunday morning, Monday night, whatever it was, and they would make a horrible play. There would be an interception, and I would just get furious. I mean, I can't even feign it for you because it would be offensive to do from the pulpit. But I would just be red in the face, maybe even swearing, shaking my fist. How can you? Are you blind? And just kind of raging. Or if they lost this important game, that coach, you ought to be fired. I mean, literally, I'm going to write an email right now, a nasty gram to the organization, because that you called a pass play when you're on the 1-yard line. Come on, and there's actually, you think of the Patriots and 49ers, but be that as it may, I'm not bitter. And so, how could you do that? But it would literally, I would be angry for hours afterwards. It would sway my soul. It would have such a grip on me. And you could think of, and I invest through my Roth IRA, but I shouldn't look. I shouldn't look. I should just trust that there's a multi-year plan in place. But I tend to look, and there was a time when it was unbelievable. I'm going to starve. I'm not going to, when I retire, that's it. I'm just going to die because there's no money, and it would just upset me so much. And so we have to, in terms of this love for the world, we were just singing about trust. I mean, that was a beautiful God-inspired set this morning. But we were just singing about He provides all things, everything we need. And I'm back there, and as we're worshiping, I'm just thinking, how true. But if I'm loving the world, how am I going to love God enough to trust Him to provide for all my needs? And if I'm letting the world sway my soul, sway my heart, one way or the other, if I'm built up, and because my political, candidate got into office, and or I'm down because my political candidate didn't win office, and I'm letting the world dictate how I feel because I'm watching the news, and it makes me so angry. Then you know what? That's the love of the world. It has its hooks in your soul, and it's bothering you because in that moment you're not enjoying or being blessed by the peace of God. Can you imagine that? The world could go to hell in a handbasket, and I hope you know it is. Oh, we're not. But why is it as though we are walking through, we are sojourners, pilgrims, waiting for a city on high? Why is it that when we live in this world, we let the things of this world sway our souls to the point where we don't know how we're going to handle this? I'm at a loss. Should the words "I'm at a loss" ever come from a Christian? You are not at a loss. You serve the living God that owns. Your eternity is secure. You know the ending. And to be in love with the world is anathema. John uses, he says that friendship with the world is enmity with God. Now I got a little carried away on that, but no, just wait, agape's coming up. Let's get into agape. This is the highest form of love. It's unconditional, it's self-sacrificial, it's covenant love. Covenant love. It's not rooted in emotion, attraction, or mutual benefit. I'm going to say that again. It's not rooted in emotion, attraction, or mutual benefit. A willful, determined commitment, that is, agape is a willful, determined commitment to seek another's highest good regardless of their response. Regardless of their response. Regardless of how they view you. Is that you're willing to sacrifice yourself, or you see, is there somebody that we know that really set the model for this, right? That somebody is willing to die for you, even before you ever knew it. That God demonstrated His love for you. That while you were yet sinners, Christ died for us, right? That this is the sacrificial agape love. It says it doesn't matter on how you respond to me. I'm going to love you in this way. I hope you get it. I hope you see it. But if you don't, it doesn't matter, because it's not. There's not a reciprocity. It's not reciprocal. I can say that much easier. It's not reciprocal. And I'm not looking to love you so you can love me. I'm looking to love you because Christ loved me, and I am going to love my neighbor as myself. So you can say the hard things in love. You can have the difficult conversations. You can tell your spouse no when they want to go out and party. You can tell your child no when they want to go and hang out with the wrong people. Now, you should do it kindly and gently. There's no need to be harsh, but you can do it. You can put a line in the sand. You can say we are seeking the Lord, and we're gonna grow. Husbands, you lead with this agape love. You serve your wives and the Bible says this in Ephesians 5, that husbands are to lay down their lives for their wives, for their bride. And he goes on, Paul does, and says, well, I'm not talking about the church, or I'm not talking about marriage, but I'm talking about the church, excuse me. And wives, yeah, it calls you to submit. But do you think it would be easy to submit to a man that's dying to himself? That he's really going all in? And you can see that. Boy, finding that right combination, if you have that, God bless you. That it can be a challenging combination, but by God, all things are possible. I'll just add this. Jessica and I, in the world, apart from Christ, would not be married. But with Christ, we're married and enjoy a good, healthy relationship. Praise God. Glory to God. And so this is agape. It's willful and determined. It is the most dominant word for love in the New Testament, of course, citing our example here that you're to love the Lord God with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and that you're to love your neighbor as yourself. And then both of these commandments use the word agape. This is not a feeling, is a covenant commitment. So now, how about the second commandment to agape our neighbors? And so there is an inseparable link between the two, and I don't have slides for this portion, but Jesus said that, and the second is like it. And he uses this Greek phrase, homia ate, and so homo ia, and so homo, of course, means the same. And so it's homeo ate, and it is a crucial understanding that Jesus isn't saying the second commandment is similar in the way two unrelated things might resemble one another. He is saying that the second flows from the same source and operates on the same principle as the first. That your love for God should be to lay down your life and, of course, pick up your cross daily and follow me, right? This is what Christ said. It's self-denial. It's a commitment. Does following Christ always feel good? Pop quiz. No, it doesn't. Are you okay with that? Or do you have a standard that, like, I'm going to go to church and I'm going to serve and do things only as long as it's convenient for me? There's a difference between a churchgoer and a disciple of Christ. And we have a distinction here at Shed Church, maybe when I say we, me, that we don't have volunteers. Because volunteers serve when it's convenient for them, whereas servants serve because it's what God has called them to do. And it's a distinction that's important in discipleship, that is, in seeing you grow in your relationship with the Lord, that you understand that this isn't about your convenience or about your pleasure. This is about laying down your life because you've committed in a covenant relationship with the living God that I am accepting you as the Lord of my life. It's not just his title. Think about it. The Lord, it's not his name, it's his title. You know, it's what a slave would call his master in antiquity. That I'm not in this for myself. I am bought and paid for, it says in Scripture. We are bought and paid for by the precious blood of the Lamb. So this has the idea of agape, and then not only do we have that with God, but then we have that with one another. This is why, guys, I got to say, and I think I meant to say this up front, I'm so grateful and blessed for this fellowship because you guys, show up and show out. The picnic yesterday is a great example of so many people that laid down their lives and worked very hard to make that happen. And typically I'm a church planner, have been, I've done and headed up every ministry, even up into the 5th year of a church plant, and had to be the point man on all these things. And now, with this health issues I've been having, I'm not able to do that, but there's not even a hiccup. Not even a hiccup, because God has raised up servants amongst us that do these things. And I am blessed personally as the pastor of this fellowship to watch you guys just go and serve God. It's an amazing thing, and that is loving your neighbor as yourself. That's what that is. We have a couple more outreaches coming up in August. They're spaced about 2.5 weeks apart. And I know there's a lot going on this summer. I know there is, but you know what? You know what we're doing with these next 2 outreaches? Is we're going out into the public square and we're sharing the love of Christ. And I'm asking you, one servant to another, I'm asking you to show up for these, to help decorate the float, to walk beside the float, and to hand out balloons to little kids, or an ice cold water bottle, to hand them up one of our pamphlets. I'm actually going to write tomorrow. I'm going to merge one of our pamphlets with the gospel message and make a tract that we can just hand these out to people as we walk along. This parade in Clearwater, it's not like a half an hour, maybe you're going to be on the route. We're not, and then some of you are going to ask to go on a Sunday morning to the rodeo to serve, where Brian's going to share the word. We're going to figure out who's going to lead worship. We're going to send a team of you out there to love on those people, those cowboys and those attending the rodeo, to represent God to those people. So I just want to encourage you. I know we've got a lot going, but you know what? God's called Shed Church to be servants. And I'm so blessed to see you guys do that, because none of these other churches are doing this in our area. But this new wine that God's pouring out here, this new wine, it's beautiful to see the response. And so that's that brotherly, or I shouldn't say, that's the agape love for other people. And so God's love becomes the model. This is the second point of brotherly or neighbor, or love your neighbor. 1 John 4:11 says, "Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another." Those words for love are agape. Ephesians 5:2 says that, and we are to walk in love as Christ also has loved us and given himself for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet-smelling aroma.